MG has won a lot of fans in recent years. So far in 2024, it's sold more cars than Peugeot, Renault and even Skoda. And that's because the hatchbacks and the SUVs that it makes offer phenomenal value for money. But there's no doubt that in the process, MG has also alienated a lot of its original fan base. The sort of people who fell in love with the brand for the less sensible and worthy models it made in bygone decades. Cars like the MGB, the MGA and the MGF. Well, whatever your thoughts, you're going to want to watch this video because MG has gone back to its roots. Sort of. This is the new MG Cyberster, and as you can see, it is a proper two-seat drop-top sports car. In this video, I'm going to be attempting to get in it, I'm going to be driving it, and I'll be finding out how fast it really is. So stay watching, and don't forget to subscribe for lots more videos like this one. So as I was saying, in some ways, this is like MG's of old because it's a two-seat drop-top sports car, or roadster if you prefer. But in others, it's a thoroughly modern concept, not least because it's a fully electric car, and also because it doesn't look like any MGs that have come before. It would have been easy for the designers to come up with a modern interpretation of, say, an MGB with big, round headlights, with lots of chrome, sort of like Fiat did with the 500, or Mini did with the original relaunch of that car back in 2001. But it hasn't done that. It's come up with a new design with only a handful of nods to the company's heritage, including this split grille down here. If anything, I'd say these headlights are actually more Alpine A110. And if you come around to the back, you will see a design that doesn't really remind me of anything, to be honest. You've got this enormous light bar that stretches right across the rear end and dives down towards the wheel arch quite aggressively. And also the indicators, they are shaped like an arrow, so they point in the direction you want to go. Now, obviously this is a two-seat sports car, so it's never going to be the most practical car in the world, but the boot actually isn't too bad at all. We've had the camera gear in here for most of the day. At the moment, there are some charging cables in there right at the back, and there's loads of space left over. I reckon you'd stand a pretty good chance of slotting a small set of golf clubs in there, although you would have to take the driver out, of course. So compared with an Alpine A110, this actually has a pretty big boot. Although, unlike a Porsche Boxster, there isn't a separate boot under the nose, which is a bit of a shame given that this is an electric car. Now, the starting price is just under £55,000, which is obviously an awful lot of money, particularly for a modern MG. The most expensive car in the company's lineup until now has been the MG4 X-Power, and that costs only £36,500. But when you consider the likely rivals that this is going to be up against in the future, then it actually looks like a bit of a bargain. The Porsche Boxster Electric, that's likely to start at around £75,000. The Polestar 6 is rumoured to be about twice that. And the Tesla Roadster, well, who knows if that'll even make it into production at all. This particular car costs £60,000 though, and that is because it is the faster GT model. So, whereas the entry-level car called the Trophy has a single 335 brake horsepower motor driving its rear wheels, this car is four-wheel drive. So it has a second electric motor on the front axle and a total of 503 bhp. And that means that on paper, this can do 0 to 60 in just 3.2 seconds. I'll be finding out if it can in a few minutes. Now, you can't spend much more than £60,000 on your Cyberster, even if you wanted to. In fact, the only options are a red roof instead of the standard black one, which adds £500 to the price. And then, unless you want your MG Cyberster in white, you'll have to pay a few £100 extra for Camden Grey, Inca Yellow, or Dynamic Red, which is what this car is. Although it is worth noting that if you go for the red or the yellow, then you can't have a red roof because that would look a bit weird. Anyway, I think it's about time we had a look inside, and there are actually two ways to get in there. So firstly, you can push this button here and look at that, scissor doors, just like a Lamborghini. And if you're thinking, well, that's potentially a bit dangerous and these doors are going to fly up and uppercut you or an innocent bystander, then you needn't worry because there are actually sensors that stop the door from opening if it senses there's something in the way. So that's really useful. The only thing is, they are quite slow. So if you're in a bit of a hurry, you can go for the good old-fashioned door hop. Okay, so we are inside, and the first thing I want to talk about is the colour of this interior. So as you can see, this car has a grey interior colour scheme, but you can also have red, and whichever colour you choose, you don't have to pay extra. Now, the red isn't going to be to everyone's tastes, but it does arguably make the car feel a little bit more special inside, and it's something you'd have to pay extra for on something like a Porsche Boxster, so it's nice to have that option. Interior quality, I think it's fair to say that modern MGs have been a bit mixed on that front. So you've had cars like the ZS and the HS SUVs that actually, given their price, are pretty nice inside compared with the competition. But then you've got cars like the MG3 and the MG4, and those have quite a lot of hard plastic inside, and they just feel pretty budget, to be honest. This is obviously a far, far more expensive car, so you would expect it to have a nicer interior, and it really does. So you've got loads of faux leather on the dashboard here, down on the center console. On the insides of the doors as well, you've got some suede down here and some nice touches like these exposed screw heads. So yes, it does feel really nice inside, certainly much more upmarket than in something like an Alpine A110. And build quality isn't far off a Porsche Boxster. Now, talking of the Boxster, you do feel like you're sitting higher up inside the MG Cyberster. And that is even despite the fact that the UK team, when they got the car from China originally, they thought the driving position was too high. So what they've managed to do is drop the seat into the car. It's as low as it can go right now. And you do feel like you're in something relatively sporty, not just a conventional hatchback. But you do still sit higher up than you do in something like a Porsche Boxster because, of course, this is an electric car and the batteries are underneath the floor here. Another thing they weren't happy with was the amount of side support on the seat. So they asked for bigger bolsters here that just help hold you in place better when you're going around corners. And actually, they are pretty comfortable. You've also got fully electric seats on all versions of the Cyberster, and actually they're reasonably supportive, although not full-on bucket seats, of course, like you get in some more hardcore drop-top sports cars. But what about the design of the interior? Well, again, there is no retro look or harking back to MG models of the 1950s and 60s. This is a properly modern interior with no fewer than 4 screens. So this might look like a single wraparound screen like the one you get in a Porsche Taycan, but it is in fact 3 screens. So the one behind the steering wheel here, that measures 10.25 inches, and that gives you information like the speed you're doing and how much charge is left in the battery. And then there's another screen on the right hand side here, that measures 7 inches, and at the moment that's configured to show energy usage, so I can see how efficiently I've been driving. And this is a touchscreen as well, although it is sometimes quite slow to respond. You can also control it using some buttons on the steering wheel here, and to be honest, that seems to be a quicker way of doing it. And then on the left hand side here, you've got another 7-inch screen, and to be honest, this one is less successful. It is where you will find all of your infotainment functions. I'm using Apple CarPlay at the moment, and it's quite small by modern standards. It's also fairly slow sometimes to react when you press it. But the biggest issue is about 1/3 of the screen is blocked by the rim of the steering wheel, so I have to kind of peer around it to see where I'm going. Now, of course, that will vary depending on how far you have the seat pushed back and how high or low you have the steering wheel, but really, it doesn't work for me, and I suspect it won't work for quite a few other people as well. The 4th and final screen is the one directly below it down here, and that is for controlling the air conditioning. Now, we're always moaning about manufacturers using touch screens and touch sensitive controls instead of good old physical knobs and buttons for the air conditioning system. And really, it's the same story here. We would just prefer some normal buttons. But on the plus side, this touchscreen is pretty quick to react. As you can see, I'm scrolling through the interior temperature there, no delay at all. I can also activate things like the heated seats and the heated steering wheel. And then on top of that, there's another touch panel up here that I can use to control some aspects of the air conditioning. So I can raise or lower the interior temperature, and I get some haptic feedback, so I know that my request has been actioned. So as I say, we would prefer proper physical controls, but this isn't too bad. And also this lower screen down here, when I'm not controlling the air conditioning, I can also use it to adjust the driving modes. We'll talk about that a little bit more shortly, and also adjust the lumbar support for the seats because there is no control for it here. Now, storage space. Of course, this is a 2-seater sports car, so you wouldn't expect it to be the most practical inside, but there is a reasonable amount of storage space. So, as you can see, I've got 2 cup holders down here. I'm using this one as a makeshift sunglasses holder. There's another small pocket next to it here, perfect size for a mobile phone. There are actually another 2 small pouches on either side of the center console here that I can put another phone or some coins. And then there is a reasonable amount of storage under this central armrest. On top of that, there are some door pockets. They're pretty small, but they're big enough for a wallet. And also, because they are covered by a lid, then when you open the scissor doors, all of your money isn't going to go flying all over the road. There is also a glove box. It's not that big, but it's plenty big enough for some gloves, or as I've used it for, a small bottle of water. And then behind me, there is some netting to stop things sliding around, and actually enough space for a couple of soft bags. So overall, as I say, for a two-seat sports car, this is reasonably practical. Now, as you can see, it is nice and sunny at the moment, but we are in Scotland today, so it is almost certainly going to rain at some point. So before I set off for drive, I'm going to find out how long it takes to put the hood back up again. So here goes, start the stopwatch now. 10.46 seconds, not bad at all. And if I want to put it back down again, 10.2 seconds before the windows came back up again. So overall, MG has done a pretty good job of this car's interior, but what about the way it drives? Let's find out. Okay, so this is of course an electric car, and that means there are no gears. There's a single speed, so these paddles here behind the steering wheel aren't needed for shifting up and down. So instead, they have been configured to adjust the regenerative braking. So if you pull this one on the left-hand side here, you can cycle between different levels of regenerative braking. So that means how quickly you slow down when you just lift off the accelerator pedal. And if you hold this paddle down, then auto mode is engaged. And that just means that the car reacts to traffic conditions around you. So if there's a car in front of you, it will slow you down more quickly, and it will let you freewheel if you're on a motorway with nothing directly ahead of you. There is also a one pedal mode as well down here that I can activate. So if I do that, then the car will bring itself quite quickly to a complete stop, even if I don't press the brake pedal. Now, this paddle on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, that changes the driving mode. So as I mentioned earlier, you can do that using this touchscreen down here, but when you're driving, it's much easier to do it by pulling this paddle behind the steering wheel. So I can cycle between comfort, custom. Custom just means I can configure individual aspects of the driving experience to my own personal preferences. So I could, for example, have the steering in its lightest mode and the sensitivity of the accelerator pedal in its most aggressive setting. There's also a sport mode, but if I want everything in maximum attack, then I need to press this Super Sport button down here. And given I have just pressed that, it's probably about time that we found out how fast this car is. So let's engage launch mode. Right, so the first thing we're going to do to give this car the best possible chance to achieve its quickest acceleration time is to put the roof up, because that improves aerodynamics, of course. Now, we are in Super Sport mode, so beyond that, it's pretty easy to engage launch. All you do is left foot on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, and then I lift off the brake pedal and I'm slingshotted down the road. Now, full disclosure here, I do have someone sitting next to me who's operating the timing gear. So again, we do have two people on board, but let's see how fast this car can do 0 to 60. God. Okay, certainly felt quick, and looking at the time, 3.62 seconds. Okay, so we know this car is ridiculously quick in a straight line, but what's it like to drive in other respects? Well, let's start with the ride, because I would say this is more a GT than a proper hardcore focused sports car. And that's no bad thing really, because it means that the people buying this car, they'll be able to use it every day and won't find it too annoying. The suspension isn't really firm, and actually it deals quite well with bigger imperfections such as potholes, expansion joints, and a few speed bumps that we've been over as well. On the other hand, there is a continual, what I would probably describe best as a shimmy through the car at all speeds. You're always aware of it. So the camera that I'm looking at right now is shaking away, and that's because small tremors are transmitted up through the car into the seat and into me actually as well. It's not overly annoying, but you are aware of it all the time. Now, what about the handling? Well, as I said, this is not a raw hardcore sports car. It's not as agile as an Alpine A110 or a Porsche Boxster. They are of course petrol rivals, and they're much lighter than this as well. So this particular car weighs almost 2 tons, and even the rear-wheel drive version is only about 100 kilos lighter. So clearly this is not going to be the most agile thing in the world, and there aren't really any electric rivals, as we've already said, to compare it to at the moment. But you know what? This does not feel overpowered like, say, an MG4 X-Power. That car is almost as fast as this in a straight line, but as soon as you come to a corner, you really want to slow down because it doesn't feel particularly composed. Whereas this hangs on surprisingly well. You can cover ground in this car really quickly and you don't feel like it's on the edge of its limits all the time. You feel confident, you trust the car to go where you point it. You just are aware that there is more body lean than in a lot of petrol roadsters. Steering is reasonably well weighted actually. It's not the most feelsome steering in the world. Again, petrol rivals are better in that respect, but it's accurate. I can put the nose of the car where I want it confidently, and the brakes as well. I talked about the MG4 X-Power. That had pretty poor brakes, a couple of hard stops in that, and you had smoke billowing out of the front wheels. Whereas this, we've been driving this car hard for quite a while now, and we've been using the brakes a fair amount, and they've been absolutely fine, stopped the car really quite well. Now obviously this is a convertible, so we need to talk about how well it protects you from the outside elements. And when the hood is down, then I would say if I was about 2 inches shorter, then it would be absolutely fine. As it is, I am just in turbulent air. If I drop down slightly, then I'm really well isolated, and that's thanks to the standard wind deflector that's behind me. So on the whole, I would say if you are about 6 foot, you're going to notice the wind swirling around your head, even with the driver's seat as low as it will go, as it is now. But if you're 5'10" or under, then you'll be pretty well protected. Okay, so we've been driving for quite a while now and we've used up a fair bit of the battery. We are down to around about 50%. So before we go and give this car back to MG, I think we should give it a charge. And there aren't many fast chargers around here in Aberdeenshire, but I've found a 150 kilowatt one at a tool station in Montrose. So let's head there now. Okay, so we are charging. Now, officially this car can accept up to 144 kilowatts of charging power. We are plugged into what is in theory a 160 kilowatt charger, and we're getting 83 kilowatts, so a little bit disappointing. But anyway, still not bad. If you are charging at the maximum rate, then this can do 10 to 80% in just under 40 minutes. So clearly there are faster charging EVs out there, but as I say, not bad at all. Now, all versions of the Cyberster have the same 74.4 kilowatt hour usable capacity battery. And if you go for the entry-level trophy model, then that has an official range of up to 316 miles on a charge. But this four-wheel drive GT model is of course heavier, and that means it can't travel quite as far on a charge. Officially, this can do 276 miles. Now, if you want to buy an MG Cyberster, you can actually put your order in already. And if you do that, you can expect to get your car before the end of August, when it's hopefully still sunny like this, although maybe not if you live in Scotland. But would I recommend you do that? Well, that really depends on how much you want an electric car. If you want to buy an EV for environmental reasons or because you can save a lot of money on company car tax, then the Cyberster actually makes a lot of sense. If, on the other hand, you're looking for a really raw, engaging roadster, then there are better options if you're prepared to consider petrol equivalents. So the Alpine A110, that's a hard top, but that is one of the best handling cars that you can buy. And the Porsche Boxster is still the class benchmark when it comes to handling. Thanks for watching this review. Let us know what you think of the new MG Cyberster. If you want to watch another review, click there. And for our full detailed written review of the new Cyberster, click there to head over to whatcar.com.